session we will do a quick revision of all the decision structures like if, elif, if else, nestedif, inlineif, Boolean and relational operators that we can use in Python program with respective programs. So let's begin. So before we start with the decision statements, let's first have a quick revision of why do we need decision structures. So whenever you're writing a program, you will definitely have something in your mind, right? These are the sequence of actions our program is going to do. So you will write an algorithm, right? So which is algorithm basically would be a complete sequence of actions that would solve the problems. Now the algorithms you are writing will be based upon three kinds of building blocks: sequence, selection and repetition. So what is sequence? Sequence is a control flow where the statements are executed in a progressive order without any decisions or without any repetition. The next one is selection. Selection, also called as decision or also called as branching, where the decision is made like some kind of conditions are checked in order to decide whether to execute the one or more statements. And the third one is the iteration, also called as repetition or looping, where you have actions or one instruction that the computer has to repeatedly perform. So these are the three basic building blocks in any algorithm. So in this class we will be just discussing about the decision or the branching statements. So whenever you're taking any kind of writing your decision statements, you will see that you will have a condition. Based upon that condition, the statements would be executed or not executed. Now these conditions are also called as expressions or test expressions, where the decision would be taken based upon the variables values of that test expression. So it generally involves relational operators and some kind of Boolean value. So what are relational operators? Nothing but it will have some kind of comparison operators like less than, greater than, less than, equal to, greater than, equal to, equality or not equality. And often this comparison will result in some kind of an output. So the output normally in the form of a Boolean value. So what are Boolean values? Either it can be true or false. A Boolean value is either 0 or 1. 0 means false, 1 means true. So suppose this is just a simple example. I can take a variable and assign it to true, right? And if I say bool again will have two values, 0 or 1. If I say bool of 0, it means false. If I say bool of 1, the output is true. And always remember, bool of any string is true, and bool of any value which is not 0, it can be anything, even 5, 10, 100, that would be true. So remember, bool of 0 is bool of any number not equal to 0 is true. So both these concepts of relational operators and Boolean values are very important when you form a condition in your decision statements. So, and also you need to understand these three basic logical operations: and, or and not, right? And this is a truth table of AND gate. If any of the input is 0, even if one input is 0, the output would be 0 in a AND gate. Only when all the inputs are 1, the output would be 1. In OR gate, it's the reverse. If all the inputs are 0, only then output is 0. Even if one input is 1, even if one of the input is 1, then the output is 1. And the third one is the NOT. Input is 0. If the input is 0, the output is 1. It just does the negation. If the input is 1, the output is 0. So let's now begin with the first decision statement, that is the if statement. See, if statement is one of the most simplest forms of decision control statements. So this is you have if, you have the condition, and you have some set of statements, right? And this is the flow chart. You have a statement and then you have a condition. If the condition is true, the statement or the code block would be executed. If it is false, then this statement or a code block would not be executed and you go to the next. And one thing you have to remember is in Python we don't have curly brackets. Normally we maintain the block of code within curly brackets. But in Python, the block of code is maintained through indentation. If you see the syntax here, see if condition statement 1 to up to n is one block of code which belongs to this if statement. So here we don't use curly brackets, it's the indentation. That means whenever you write such conditions, ensure that you give proper indentation and everything starts in the same line or same column. So give a tab space and start. Okay, now let's see the first program. So let's say a school is conducting an entrance examination for 500 marks. And this year the cutoff is 400. So if a student is scoring more than the cutoff marks, then he would, and the task is to print admission is granted if this condition is satisfied. So first you decide what are the steps that you want in your program. So let's say start, and then you say I'm going to assign 400 to some variable cutoff mark, and the third step would be I will be asking the user to input the marks. We ask the user and put that in core mark. Then we are going to put the condition. If the marks entered by the user is greater than or equal to the cutoff mark, then admission is granted. Otherwise it's end. Okay, because here we are not doing otherwise, because it's just a simple if statement. Now let's try this in the Jupyter notebook. So this is the simple 4-line of code to do this. You have cutoff is equal to 400. Now you ask the user to enter the marks. How do you ask the user? You should say input. You have to use input. Whenever you use the input command, it means you are asking the user to enter something, and this is a statement that would be printed. You say enter the marks within single quotes, and then since the input which is entered by the user would be an integer, I want an integer here, no string, no float, also just put here int outside. So that now whatever value is entered is put into the variable score marks. Now we are comparing this. If the score marks is greater than or equal to cutoff, and remember, whenever you are using any conditional statements, if, while, whatever, looping or whatever, we always have a colon in Python. Okay, it should have a colon here. If the marks is greater than the cutoff marks, you print admission is granted. See, I have given a tab space over here. So that's how we maintain the code blocks. We don't use curly brackets. Execute this. See, this line of the code is executed where you are asking enter the marks. So suppose I give the marks as 400. Because I gave the condition greater than or equal to, so that means it should say admission is granted. This condition is satisfied. So 400 is equal to 400. Therefore, it returns a true. Okay, this statement, if you actually try to print it right here, it will give true. Since the condition is true, this statement is executed. Admission is granted. Now suppose I give a value which is less, let's say just 20. Nothing is going to get printed because I am not doing any else and all, right? This statement is not executed, that's all. Okay, so this was an example of a single if statement. Now coming to the next one, if else. So basically what happens in if else, it's the same thing but you have one more else. If the condition is true, task A is executed, condition is false, task B is executed, and finally come along and continue the execution. So you just have this part which is extra. Okay, if condition colon statements belong to perform task A, else again you have to write colon here, another statement of blocks, right? So if I try to alter the same program, what I will say here is else colon print, I say admission not granted. That's all. So if you execute, if I say 20 now, it's going to print admission not granted. So because this condition was false, it goes to the else and it this. So that's it. Now let's do another program for if else statement. So suppose this is the question. Assume a bookstore is offering discount of 15%. How do you do this? So 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 how do you do this, right? Let's write the pseudo code first. Get the book prices and get the designation as Y or no. So you are asking whether you are a staff member or not. So if they say, and also ensure that you convert it into lowercase, because the input entered here now is a string. So Python is case sensitive. The user can enter capital Y or he can enter capital small y also. So whatever input is given, just convert it into lowercase. Even if he gives lowercase, it will be again in lowercase only. It will not give any kind of error. If the user gives the input in uppercase, it will be converted. So definitely you have to use this str.lower, where it will convert the input character into low. Now if it is a staff, you give reduction of 15%, else you say 10%, and then you calculate what is the price minus discount and print it. Okay, so how do you do this? Let's go to the Jupyter notebook. So I'm going to ask the user, now I'm using integer, 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 now I'm using float. Okay, because the input given book price can be, let's say, 15.550, it can be a value which will have a decimal point. Now again one more input I'm asking the user, are you a staff member, Y or N? Okay, so whatever he gives, capital Y or small y, we are going to convert it. So the value will be in desig. So that I'm going to put here str.lower, it will convert it into lowercase. Okay, now if desig is equal to y, I will say reduction, I'll create one more variable, say reduction is 0.15. Else, if desig, that means it's not a staff member, then I say reduction is 0.10. Then I will calculate what is the price as even the book price as input already. So for that, price minus price into this discount. So basically this would be the discounted price which we are going to display. So let's execute this. See, I'm asking for the book price. Let's say the book price is 2000. Okay, now I'm asking the staff member, are you staff member or not? See, if I give capital Y, it will be converted to small y by itself, and here you can see book price is calculated as what? 2000 minus 2000 into 0.15, which would be 1700. Now the same thing, if I say no, enter the book price, I will give here again 2000 and I'll give staff member no. See, I give small letter now, even that it doesn't give an error. Now the book price is 1800. So if you are a staff member, you get the price is 1700. If you are not a staff member, the price is 1800. So this is a simple if program where you are using if-else statements. Okay. Now coming to the next program, let's see another program where I want to swap two numbers, right? And whenever I'm swapping, there is a condition here. Only if x I'm going to and y I'm going to swap. Otherwise I will not swap. Okay. So let's take, right? So what is this program here? Only if I'm going to ask the user to enter two values, x and y. As I already said, I'm just taking integer now. So that is why I put here integer. If x is greater than y, I will swap. Okay. Else I will not swap. Value is there in y, you put 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 it into temp. Okay, and whatever value was in x, you put it into y. And the previous value of temp, which is nothing but y, would be put back into x. So this three statements is a simple way that you always swap two variables. Okay, so whenever you are swapping two variables, you have to have a temporary variable like this, which we have to use. So when I execute this, let's say the input x value I give as 20 and the y value I give as 30. Okay, what happened? 20 is less than 35. That's why the else part was executed. Now let me give a value which is greater. Let's say 40, I give 10. See, now it was swapped. Now how do you know it was swapped or not? What you can do is just give a print. Let's say I gave x is equal to, let's do now 20, 10. Okay, I will also give print y. What I'm doing is after swapping, I should know whether it got swapped or not. That's why I'm giving a print value. Okay, now enter the x value. Let's say x I'm giving as 40. I want to give greater, so let's say I give a y as 20. Since 40 is greater than 20, it is swapped, and so now you can see x value is 20, y is 40. Okay, it has got swapped. So this is again a simple illustration of if-else. Remember, whenever you're writing if, there should be a colon here. Else also will have a colon. Remember that. Now let's see another program again. A program to check whether a given number is a perfect square or not. Okay, suppose which is a perfect square? 81, because 9 into 9 is 81. 42 is a perfect square? No, because 6.48 into 6.48 will give you 42. So perfect square would be like 4, 9, 16, like that. Okay, so let's do this program in the notebook. Okay, now what is a program? I'm going to check whether the number is a perfect square or not. So you ask the user to enter the number. Okay, so in this case, since I'm using square root operation, right, I am importing a module called as math. Okay, in order to do some square root operations and floor functions also. We will see what it is. So first ask the user to enter a number which is greater than 0. Okay, so that number would be num. Suppose the user has entered 81, so that would be in num. Now how square is a perfect square? If I'm able to take a square root of that, right? And then I don't have to do any kind of rounding off, then it is a perfect square. So for example here, if I number is 81, now you take the, what is this? This basically does 81 to the power of 0.5. 0.5, that is 81 to the power of 1 by 2, nothing but square root of 81. Okay, so this will do square root of 81, right? And here whatever square root is calculated for, on that I am doing math module. Under math module I have a function called as floor. It does rounding off to the nearest whole number. Suppose I say math.floor for 5.3, it will give the output as 5. If I say math.floor of minus 5.3, it will give the output as minus 6. So it, see, we can just try this. So but before that you have to import the math module. Okay. See, what has happened is it does the rounding off to the nearest whole number. Let's now do 5.8. See, so basically it does rounding off to the nearest whole number. If it is a positive value, 5 would be taken. If it's a negative value, you can see how it works. It goes to the next one because it's a negative value, so minus 6 will come. Okay, now in this case, if I have given the output as 9, so what you're going to do, get 9 itself. If I give the input as 9.2, you get 9. So basically what is this doing is rounding off, it will be doing. Okay, so whatever square root is found out, for that would be rounded off. Okay, next after rounding off, what we are doing now is I'm going to print that. Okay, whatever value you got, you're going to print. Square root of 81 is 9, 9 would be printed. But I have to find it's a perfect square or not. So what I will do, again I will multiply whatever 9 I've got. 9 into 9, that is 81 will come here. Then we will cross check. Is this 81 was actually the one you gave, right? So let's take an example and execute this and see. See, when I execute, let's enter a number greater than 0. Let's say I will try with 81. Enter. So it is saying floor of this one, floor or square root of number is 9, and then here this would be 9 into 9 and square number is also 9, and that's why it's printing this. Suppose I execute with not a perfect square, let's say 42. Okay, it is saying it's not a perfect square. Why is it saying that is, what happens with 42? What is the square root of 42? As I told you, square root of 42 is 6.48. Okay, so when it is rounding off, it will get the value of 6, right? We will print this. Let's see. See, rounded value sqrt num. See, if I give 42 here, rounded value what I am giving 6. Actually it is 6.42. But when it tries to multiply 6 into 6, it will be 36. And it is trying to equate that to square number, which is 42. So 42 is not equal to 36, and that's why it's printing not a perfect square. Okay, try this in your Jupyter notebook. Try out each step, will come to know. Any doubts, just let me know. Now coming to the next part, inline if statement. So inline if statement is just what you can do is, instead of having this multiple statements of if else, within one single statement you can put it in one line. Okay, so that's why we call it as inline, and it is also called as a ternary operator because here we will have condition as more than one operator in one single expression. Right, you will have more than one single operator in one single expression. That's why it's called as ternary operator, and this is the syntax. Okay, you will have the expression which I'm checking, if condition, else expression 2. Okay, or this is one more expression, if condition 1, you have the test expression. If condition 1 is true, execute expression, execute some expression, else execute expression 2. So let's see this in the Jupyter notebook. See, the same thing, cutoff marks example which I had here, right? If the cutoff marks is greater than 400, admission is granted, otherwise it's not granted. Now that 4 lines of code, I put it in one single line here. Right? So what we have done is we ask the user to enter the scored marks. We give the cutoff marks. Now admission would be false. That means admission would not be granted if the marks scored is less than cutoff. Else true. So basically what this is the example of inline if, right? If this is the condition, else this is the expression, right? If condition is true, this would be executed, else this would be executed. So let's execute this. Enter the exam marks. Let's say I give 300. You can see what happened if the marks is less. Yes, it is less, and therefore false is printed. So this is the example of if condition, inline if condition. Okay. So you have expression 1 would be executed if condition is true, else expression 2 will be executed. This is the syntax. Now coming to the if-elif statements. So if-elif is basically we will have more than one condition. If condition 1 is true, code block 1 is executed. Elif condition 2 is true, code block 2 is executed. Elif condition n is true, code block n is executed. Finally you will have else, where if none of these conditions are true, then this last code block will be executed. Okay, so basically you can have many conditions here. So that's this if-elif. Okay, where you have more than one comparisons that have to be taken care of, then you can go for if-elif. Okay, so this is a simple program. Okay, where I am saying if the marks is greater than or equal to 90, print O. Elif, if marks is greater than 79 and less than or equal to 89, print A. Elif, marks greater than 69 and marks less than or equal to 79, print B. So like this you have multiple conditions. Whenever you have multiple conditions, go for if-elif. And finally remember you will have a else. Print F. So that means what? None of these conditions were true, and that is why it has printed F. Okay. This is a simple example of if-elif. Now let's do one more if-elif program in the Jupyter notebook, where it is based upon the body mass index. Okay. Now body mass index is what? Which will be calculated from the height and weight of a person. So how do you calculate the body mass index? Is you take the weight divided by the height square. Okay, you have the weight divided by height square. If the body mass index value you get is less than 18.5, you display that it is underweight. If the body mass index you get is 18.5 to 24.9, you display normal. If it is 25 to 29.9, overweight. If it is greater than or equal to 30, obesity. So this is a question they have given. Okay, find the body mass index from a person and display these values. So how do you do this in the program? You first ask the user, enter the weight, enter the height. Now weight I am taking in integer, it's left to you. How do you want to take? You can take in decimal also, it's fine. Then you give your float. But height I am taking in meters. So remember that this formula applies. Weight should be in kgs, height should be in meters. Okay, and it is I am taking it in floating point value. How do you calculate the body BMI? Weight divided by height square. Okay, height square, how do you do? Height into height. Just use the asterisk operator, and this is slash, this is for the division operator. Now print your BMI is, I am going to print this. Now I have the if-elif statements. If BMI is less than 18.5, underweight. If it is from here to here, normal. If it is from 25 to 29.9, it is overweight. If BMI is greater than 30, print obesity. See, in this case I don't have a else part, it's fine. Okay, otherwise you don't have to write this, you just give your else, then also it works. Okay, now let's execute this. So let's say enter the weight, let's say I give 70. Enter the height, let's say I give 160. Okay, it has to be in meters, 1.65. See, the BMI is, I'm getting 25.71, it is saying you are overweight. Okay, so that's an example of if-elif. Now coming to the nested if. So nested if is where you have if within a if. So instead of, unlike the previous case, you have multiple if statements, multiple conditions. But nested if is like this. You have a if condition, under that I have one more if condition. So if this condition is true only, then the next if condition is executed. Okay, so let's see this example. Right, so this Python script, this is the algorithm. Let's say I want to find the largest of 3 numbers. That's all. Simple. Find the largest of 3 numbers. Then how do you do it? Let's go to the Jupyter notebook. Ask the user, enter the first number, enter the second number, enter the third number. Let's put it to num1, num2, num3. Now since I have to use your nested if, okay, first condition if I'll put here, where I will say if first number is greater than number 2, and that means both conditions have to be true, and number 1 is greater than number 3, that means the largest number is number 1. Right, else means what? Now if suppose number 1 is not greater, then I have just 2 more options. Either number 2 would be greater or number 3 will be greater. So under that you are putting this if statement. Okay, so this if statement is nested under this if statement. Now here you try. Number 2 is greater than number 3, largest number is number 2, else number 3. Okay, so just execute. Let's say I give the first number as 20, second number as 30, the third number as 10, and it is saying the largest number is 30. So that means this condition, this statement was executed. Okay. So that's it. So today's session we have discussed all the different decision statements blocks with some programs. Try out all this. So it's always important that you try the programs in your ideally screen or whatever Anaconda prompt or in your Jupyter notebook. Try and get accustomed to these decision statements. Any doubt, just let me know. So in the next session we will see looping statements in Python. Thank you. And please subscribe to the channel. Any queries, any suggestions or any help, please let me know in the comment box. Thank you so much.